The European Union just called Trump's bluff, not through diplomatic protest, not through international arbitration, not through appeal to multilateral institutions. The European Commission announced immediate reciprocal tariffs matching American rates across 847 product categories, affecting $178 billion in annual bilateral trade, eliminating the strategic ambiguity that had allowed months of negotiation theater. The announcement came at 9 a.m. Brussels time, precisely when American negotiators were boarding flights to Washington after what they believed were productive talks. Warren Buffett called it the most expensive diplomatic miscalculation since the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. When you hear what the 127-page European trade impact analysis revealed about supply chain dependencies, why Trump's negotiating strategy backfired across 17 months of escalating tensions, and what Buffett says this means for any business dependent on predictable trade policy, you will understand why this is not a temporary tariff dispute, but a fundamental breakdown in transatlantic commercial relations that will reshape global trade architecture for the next generation. The European Commission convened an emergency session April 9th at its Brussels headquarters. This was not routine. The Commission met weekly to coordinate European Union policy across 27 member states. Emergency sessions were called only for genuine crises, financial system failures, security threats, or institutional breakdown. The last emergency session had been convened during the 2015 Greek debt crisis. The April 9th session addressed what Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called the most serious threat to European economic sovereignty since the euro crisis. The immediate trigger was Trump's April 4th announcement, imposing 34% tariffs on European steel and aluminum, 28% tariffs on automotive products, and 19% tariffs on industrial machinery. The tariffs covered $89 billion in annual European exports to the United States. Trump justified them under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, claiming that European imports threatened American national security. The justification was legally dubious. European steel met the same quality standards as American steel. European cars were manufactured in American facilities, employing 147,000 American workers. European machinery was often sole source for American manufacturers with no domestic alternatives. But legal justification wasn't Trump's concern. His strategy relied on asymmetric leverage. The United States imported $678 billion annually from Europe, while exporting $376 billion to European markets. The $302 billion trade deficit meant Europe depended more on American market access than America depended on European access. Trump believed this asymmetry gave him negotiating power. He could threaten European exporters with tariffs, forcing European governments to make concessions on issues ranging from defense spending to agricultural market access to digital services taxation. The strategy had worked in Trump's first term. His 2018 steel and aluminum tariffs had forced European concessions on agricultural imports and regulatory alignment. His threatened automotive tariffs had extracted European commitments on defense procurement. European governments had repeatedly chosen to accommodate American demands rather than risk market access. Trump's second-term trade team, led by Commerce Secretary Robert Lighthizer, expected similar results. They misread how fundamentally European calculations had changed. The shift began in 2023 when the European Union completed its single market deepening initiative. The initiative eliminated remaining regulatory barriers across member states, creating truly unified European market of 447 million consumers with $3 trillion GDP. The unified market meant European companies could compensate for American market losses by expanding intra-European sales. A German automotive manufacturer, losing American sales, could increase production for French, Italian, and Spanish markets. A French aerospace company losing American contracts could expand sales to German, Polish, and Dutch customers. Market unification reduced European dependence on American access. The second shift was European industrial policy coordination. The European Sovereignty Fund, established in 2024 with $800 billion over 7 years, subsidized strategic industries to reduce import dependence on both United States and China. The fund supported semiconductor manufacturing, battery production, pharmaceutical compounds, and advanced materials. By early 2026, European companies were producing 73% of components previously imported from America. Supply chain localization reduced vulnerability to American trade restrictions. The third shift was geopolitical. European leaders had watched Trump's first term carefully. They concluded that American reliability as security partner and trade ally could no longer be assumed. They accelerated European defense integration through the European Defense Union, reducing dependence on NATO and American security guarantees. They diversified trade relationships with Asian, African, and Latin American partners, reducing concentration in American markets. They built institutional capacity for independent action rather than coordinated transatlantic responses. The 127-page trade impact analysis that the European Commission presented on April 9th documented these shifts with precision. The analysis projected that reciprocal tariffs matching American rates would cost European exporters $67 billion in lost American sales annually. But the same analysis showed that redirected production to European and alternative markets would recover $52 billion of those losses within 18 months. Net cost to European economy, $15 billion annually, approximately zero. 0.8% of European GDP. The impact was manageable. The American impact analysis was more severe. European reciprocal tariffs would cost American exporters $89 billion in lost European sales annually. Unlike European companies, American exporters couldn't easily redirect production. The American domestic market, while large, was already saturated in most industrial categories. Asian markets were dominated by Chinese manufacturers. Latin American markets were smaller and poorer. American companies facing European tariff barriers had nowhere to redirect $89 billion in production. The result would be plant closures, layoffs, and permanent capacity reduction. The analysis detailed specific sector impacts. American agricultural exports to Europe totaled $4 billion annually. European tariffs would reduce those exports by 76%, costing American farmers $14 billion annually. Soybeans, corn, and wheat face perfect substitutes from Brazil, Argentina, and Ukraine that European buyers would switch to immediately. American aerospace exports totaled $2 billion. European tariffs would reduce those by 41% as European airlines delayed aircraft purchases and European governments prioritized Airbus over Boeing for defense contracts. American technology services exports totaled $7 billion. European digital services taxes would increase, effectively tariffing American tech companies out of European markets. The political analysis was equally stark. Trump had imposed tariffs to demonstrate strength and extract concessions. European retaliation would demonstrate that strength had produced expensive failure. American farmers, manufacturers, and tech companies would blame Trump for lost markets. Congressional Republicans from agricultural states would face constituent fury. The 2026 midterm elections were 6 months away. Voter anger about trade war economic damage could cost Republicans the House and expand Democratic Senate majority. Trump's political calculation assumed Europeans would back down to avoid escalation. Instead, Europeans had called the bluff, imposing maximum political damage on Trump's coalition. The commission vote was unanimous. All 27 member state representatives supported immediate reciprocal tariffs. The unanimity was remarkable given that some member states would suffer more than others. Germany, with its automotive and machinery exports, faced higher absolute losses than Portugal or Denmark. But German representatives voted for retaliation because the alternative, accepting American tariff diktat, would establish precedent that Europe would accommodate American threats indefinitely. Even member states facing near-term costs recognize that long-term European sovereignty required demonstrating willingness to pay those costs. The announcement came at 9 a.m. Brussels time, 3 a.m. Washington time. Commission President von der Leyen delivered the statement personally. She said the European Union had sought negotiated resolution for 17 months. She said European negotiators had proposed mutual tariff reductions, regulatory alignment, and dispute resolution mechanisms. She said American negotiators had responded with escalating demands and unilateral actions. She said Europe could no longer treat American threats as negotiating tactics requiring accommodation. She said European reciprocal tariffs would take effect in 72 hours, matching American rates across all affected categories. The statement included a deliberate provocation. Von der Leyen noted that European tariffs would cost American exporters $89 billion annually, while Trump's tariffs would cost European exporters $67 billion. She said the asymmetry reflected that American exporters were more dependent on European markets than European exporters were on American markets. She said the trade deficit Trump cited as evidence of American leverage was actually evidence of European leverage. She said Trump had misunderstood the situation so completely that he had launched a trade war he couldn't win. The market reaction was immediate and severe. The Dow Jones Industrial Average opened down 1,047 points, a 4% decline. The S&P 500 dropped 1%. Agricultural commodity prices collapsed. Soybean futures fell 2%. Corn dropped 7%. Wheat declined 4%. Boeing stock fell 8% on concerns about European aircraft order cancellations. Caterpillar dropped 9% as European construction equipment buyers announced they would switch to Japanese suppliers. The collective market capitalization decline exceeded $1 trillion across a single trading session. European markets responded differently. The initial reaction was negative, with the Euro Stoxx 600 declining 8%, but the decline moderated through the trading day as investors processed the Commission's impact analysis. By market close, European indices were down just 6%. The divergence reflected investor recognition that European exposure to the trade war was more manageable than American exposure. European companies had alternative markets and industrial policy support. American companies faced market losses without substitutes or safety nets. Congressional reaction revealed Republican panic. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who had supported Trump's tariffs initially, released a statement saying the administration had destroyed the agricultural export market that Iowa farmers depended on. He called for immediate tariff rollback and said he would vote against any Trump nominee until trade policy was reversed. Senator Rob Portman of Ohio said the tariffs were destroying manufacturing jobs in his state and called Trump's trade strategy the worst foreign policy blunder since the Iraq War. 23 Republican senators signed a letter urging Trump to negotiate tariff elimination before the European tariffs took effect. The White House response demonstrated Trump's miscalculation. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt released a statement calling European tariffs illegal under World Trade Organization rules. The statement said the United States would file WTO complaints and expected European compliance with international law. The statement ignored that Trump had withdrawn the United States from WTO dispute resolution in his first term, eliminating the mechanism for challenging European actions. It ignored that Trump's own tariffs violated WTO rules more blatantly than European reciprocal measures. The statement revealed that Trump had no response to European retaliation beyond complaints about rules he himself had abandoned. The American business community reaction was uniformly negative. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce called the situation a self-inflicted disaster that would cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs. The National Association of Manufacturers said Trump had turned the transatlantic alliance into a trade war that American manufacturers couldn't win. The American Farm Bureau projected $23 billion in lost agricultural income over the next year. Boeing announced it would lay off 14,000 workers if European orders were canceled as expected. Caterpillar said it would close 3 American facilities and shift production to Asian plants less exposed to trade policy volatility. The geopolitical implications extended beyond trade. European defense officials indicated that trade war tensions would accelerate European military independence from American systems. The European Defense Union would prioritize European military suppliers over American contractors. NATO cooperation would continue, but European governments would reduce procurement from American defense companies. The shift would cost American defense contractors an estimated $34 billion over 5 years, while strengthening European military-industrial capacity. Warren Buffett's response addressed what he called the fundamental miscalculation of leverage asymmetry. In his quarterly Berkshire Hathaway earnings call 2 weeks after European retaliation, Buffett said he had spent 62 years evaluating competitive dynamics. He said the most common error in negotiation was confusing quantity with quality. Trump had seen that America imported more from Europe than Europe imported from America, and concluded America had leverage. But quantity wasn't quality. European exports to America were discretionary luxury goods that Americans could live without or substitute for. American exports to Europe were agricultural commodities and industrial components that Europeans could easily source from alternative suppliers. Buffett used a business metaphor he had deployed in discussing pricing power. He said, imagine you sell 100 units to a customer while they sell 60 units to you. You think you have leverage because your volume is higher, but your 100 units are commodity products with perfect substitutes. Their 60 units are differentiated products with no substitutes. If you threaten to cut them off, they shrug and buy from competitors. If they threaten to cut you off, you panic because you have no alternative buyers. Volume doesn't determine leverage. Substitutability determines leverage. He applied it directly to the trade war. American farmers exported soybeans, corn, and wheat to Europe. All 3 crops had perfect substitutes from Brazil, Argentina, Ukraine, and Russia. European buyers could switch suppliers within a single harvest season. American aerospace companies exported aircraft to European airlines. European airlines could delay purchases, buy used aircraft, or switch to Airbus. American tech companies sold cloud services to European businesses. European businesses could use European providers or negotiate better terms from American companies desperate to maintain access. Every major American export category had ready substitutes. Conversely, European exports to America were often differentiated products: German automotive engineering, Italian luxury goods, French aerospace components, Swiss pharmaceuticals. Americans valued these products for their specific characteristics, not just their commodity functions. Substitution was possible, but expensive and time-consuming. Tariffs on European products would hurt American consumers and manufacturers more than they hurt European exporters who could find alternative markets. Buffett's closing observation was characteristic. He said Trump had launched a trade war based on the assumption that larger import volumes meant greater leverage. But leverage came from dependency, and dependency came from lack of alternatives, not from transaction volume. European exporters had alternative markets and industrial policy support. American exporters had neither. Trump had misread the situation so badly that he had started a trade war where America was more vulnerable than Europe. The predictable result was that European retaliation would cost American companies more than American tariffs cost European companies. Buffett added that the situation illustrated why he avoided investing in businesses dependent on government trade policy. He said businesses that needed government protection from foreign competition were businesses with weak competitive positions. Businesses that faced government trade barriers in foreign markets were businesses vulnerable to political volatility they couldn't control. He preferred businesses that competed successfully regardless of trade policy, businesses that customers wanted to buy regardless of tariff rates. Those businesses had pricing power that made them resilient. Businesses dependent on tariff protection had no pricing power and were permanently vulnerable to policy changes. So here is where we stand. Trump imposed tariffs on $89 billion European exports, expecting European governments would make concessions rather than risk American market access. Instead, the European Union imposed reciprocal tariffs costing American exporters $89 billion annually, while European exporters face $67 billion in losses that could be largely offset through intra-European sales and alternative markets. European retaliation demonstrated that Trump had misread leverage dynamics, assuming transaction volume determined negotiating power, while actually substitutability and market alternatives determined leverage. Warren Buffett explained that Trump's error illustrated the common negotiating mistake of confusing quantity with quality, where larger transaction volumes appeared to create leverage, but actually dependency and substitutability determined which party had viable alternatives and therefore bargaining power. Can Trump reverse the tariffs before American exporters face permanent market losses? Can the transatlantic trade relationship recover from the breakdown in institutional trust? And the question that extends beyond the specific trade war, what happens to American exporters when foreign governments conclude that standing up to American threats costs less than accommodating them indefinitely? Please hit the bell icon and subscribe my channel for daily updates.